What's going on, coaches? Hunter and Sherb from Team Misfit HQ today talking to you about the back rack walking lunge, and specifically when we're doing this exercise for strength building. When it's a smaller set of lunges, for example, we've got 8 coming up in the program, but really regardless of how many you're doing, there's still a few points of performance to consider, and because it is such few reps, we want to make sure athletes are able to actually get enough weight on the bar to get kind of that strength stimulus, but it absolutely starts with making sure athletes are lunging correctly. So before Sherb even unracks a bar, worries about that, we're going to take a look at a couple points of performance for the lunge, keeping in mind that that barbell is going to be resting on the back rack, so conveniently pretty close to right over his hips. As he takes that lunge step forward, very similar to when we do a teaching progression of a split jerk, we're looking for this front shin to be about vertical and this back thigh to be about vertical. So if Sherb were to lunge really far forward, he might be able to get his front shin closer to vertical, but that back thigh is really, really overstretched and in a position that might not be super strong, might even be dangerous for some. If he short steps it a little too much, he goes he's getting his knee to start to track out over his toe. That front heel's starting to come off the ground. We're really loading up kind of that patella tendon knee area, which we also don't want. So we're looking for kind of that middle ground one more time. Good position here. Front shin vertical, back thigh vertical. This is going to really help load kind of the big movers in his left leg in this instance. So now that we get the positioning down, we're thinking about how we want athletes moving from one rep to the next, which is by thinking about whatever their front leg is on that step, we want to think about pulling the ground backward behind them. So Sherb's going to take a step forward. He's got a lot of weight on his back. He's going to think about pulling that ground, and those hips kind of move up and forward at kind of a 45-degree angle, just like so. He can step through. He can bring his feet together if he needs to, but that's not super important. But what is that we have those shin and femur mechanics, and then he's dragging that ground toward you. A common kind of fault to identify here is kind of the split squat style, where he does a good lunge, but instead he kind of comes straight up, then shifts weight moving forward, comes straight up, then steps forward. We kind of want one smooth, continuous forward motion with momentum. I'm going to have Sherb just demo 4 steps here. So he's going to unrack the bar. Just like he would for a back squat, we're still thinking about bracing this midline, just like we would with any loaded movement. And then he's going to take that step forward. Again, looking for that vertical torso. Sherb, step a little farther forward. There you go. That was better. We can see he's keeping those mechanics generally the same. And then he can finish, hopefully, his 8 steps in one length, turn around, and then go back and re-rack the bar. Okay, now let's talk about 2 other lunge variations, specifically if you don't have space. The benefit to walking lunges is that we get a stretch in that rear thigh, some really good extension through the hip that we miss when we do an in-place reverse lunge, for example. We're not quite loading up that hip flexor and psoas quite as much. But if you have limited space, then doing them right in place might be how it has to be. So the forward stepping lunge, Sherb's still going to apply the same thing. We're going to step forward, and this time we're kind of driving backward in the opposite direction. So he steps forward, rear knee touches, all the mechanics remain the same. He's just going to kind of return to that other position. Okay? That's preferred because, again, we get that stretch in the front area of that non-working leg, but alternatively, reverse lunges are a great way because we can actually load up the posterior maybe a little bit more effectively for athletes. Little coordination here because he obviously can't see his back foot, but again, as coaches, we're just looking for the same mechanics, that front shin to be approximately vertical, back thigh to be that working foot totally flat on the ground. You can re-rack it. So regardless of what version of lunging your athletes are going to be doing today, we're still looking for some basic mechanics. Front shin, that working leg, that front shin's nice and vertical, and that foot is nice and flat. Just like a back squat, we don't want the toes coming up, nor do we want the heels coming up. We're lunging through the entire foot. On the step, we're taking forward kind of steps. We're pulling the ground toward us so that we engage kind of that hamstring and glute. And then, as with basically every movement we do in CrossFit, we're looking for that midline stabilization where we keep that trunk as rigid as possible so we can transfer force from legs into barbell. Okay? There you have it, some tips for coaching the walking lunge. Give it a shot, give us a like. We'll see you in the next one.